The snow fell like tiny silver needles, drifting endlessly across the frozen plains of the distant planet Arendor. Winds howled across the jagged ice formations, creating eerie patterns that shifted constantly, as though the planet itself were alive. Dr. Alara Voss wrapped her thick survival jacket tighter around her body, shivering despite the layers of protection. She had been trained for extreme conditions, but nothing could fully prepare anyone for the biting cold of Arendor. Alara's team had been on an expedition to study the unique ice crystals that formed naturally on the planet. They were beautiful, almost magical, refracting light into tiny rainbows across the frozen landscape. But beauty did not forgive danger. A sudden storm had separated her from the rest of the team, scattering them like leaves in the wind. She had tried to call them, but the storm had disabled the communication devices, leaving only silence in the frozen air. The doctor's breath formed clouds in front of her face as she struggled to see the path through the thick, swirling snow. Each step was a battle. Her boots sank into the ice-crusted snow, and the wind tugged at her with invisible hands as if trying to push her into the endless white expanse. Her heart beat fast, not from fear but from the effort of surviving. Alara knew she had to find shelter. The storms on Arendor were unpredictable, and even a few hours of exposure could be fatal. She spotted a series of jagged ice formations a short distance ahead and dragged herself toward them. Using her portable tools, she carefully chipped away at the ice to create a small cave-like shelter. It was crude and cold, but it offered protection from the wind and allowed her to rest for a moment. She huddled inside, wrapping herself in the thermal blanket she had carried in her pack. Her fingers were numb and her legs ached from hours of trudging through the snow. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but it was not the immediate danger. The cold was. Alara reminded herself to stay calm. Panic could be deadly here. She checked the signal beacon in her pack. It was weak, flickering with barely any power left. If someone didn't find her soon, she knew she might not survive the night. Far across the icy plains, Cale Arden scanned the horizon through the lens of his high-tech binoculars. A veteran of the colony's defense force, Kyle was known for his strength, determination, and an almost uncanny ability to survive where others could not. He had been on patrol when he noticed a faint flicker of a signal. Weak, irregular, almost like a heartbeat. His instincts told him someone was in danger. Normally, the rules required him to wait for backup before investigating. But Cale had never been one to follow rules when a life was at stake. He mounted his hover sled and pushed off into the storm, the vehicle cutting through the thick snow with powerful engines. Each movement was precise. He knew the terrain could be as deadly as the storm itself. Back in her small ice shelter, Alara tried to stay awake. She paced in the tiny space, rubbing her arms to keep blood flowing. She remembered the stories of explorers who had survived Arendor's storms by using clever methods and understanding the planet's subtle patterns. Using her knowledge of the wind currents, she adjusted the entrance of her shelter to reduce the impact of the storm. Small victories like these kept her mind sharp and her hope alive. The storm grew stronger as night approached. Visibility dropped to almost zero. The snow began to fall in thick, blinding sheets, and the wind screamed like a living creature. Alara felt her strength faltering. Her fingers were stiff, and she could barely keep her eyes open. She closed her eyes for just a moment, promising herself that she would continue moving when she woke. Cale pushed on relentlessly. He had faced dangerous conditions before, but the sheer intensity of Arendor's storm tested even him. Ice cracked under the sled. Sharp ridges threatened to flip the vehicle, and strange shadows moved in the distance. Cale's training kept him calm. Every decision was calculated. Every risk was measured. He knew that out there in the blizzard, survival depended on human skill, courage, and adaptability. Hours passed, and both Alara and Cale fought their own battles against exhaustion and cold. Alara, weak and trembling, tried to keep her mind focused on tasks. Keeping the fire going, checking the signal beacon, and conserving energy. Cale, meanwhile, navigated through a labyrinth of ice formations, guided only by the faint beacon signal that promised a human life at the end of this perilous journey. Suddenly, the signal strengthened. Alara's heart leapt, and she crawled to the entrance of her shelter. She waved a small light, hoping against hope that someone would see it. The snow whipped against her face, burning her skin, but she refused to give up. Somewhere in the storm there was a chance, however small, that she would be rescued. Cale saw the flicker in the distance. He adjusted his path, heading directly toward it. The snowstorm made it difficult to see, and he had to rely on his instincts and experience more than technology. Each step was dangerous, but he pressed forward. Human determination was his greatest tool, far more powerful than any machine. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kyle reached the ice shelter. He saw Alara's outline against the faint light of her beacon. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms. Her body was cold and weak, but she was alive. Relief flooded both of them, though there was no time to celebrate. The storm was still raging and the ice underfoot was unstable. Cale quickly assessed their situation. He wrapped his thermal cloak around Alara and used his portable equipment to reinforce the shelter temporarily. "We need to move," he said firmly, his voice calm but urgent. "This storm won't stop and this ice could collapse at any moment." Alara nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. Her trust in this stranger, this lone warrior, was immediate. She had no choice, and she sensed that he knew exactly what to do. Cale's confidence, his skill, and his sheer presence were enough to instill hope. Humans had survived worse, and somehow together they would survive this. The first signs of nightfall on Arendor were approaching, painting the sky with deep, dark blues. The storm howled louder, but Cale guided Alara through the snow, every step carefully calculated. He moved with a quiet determination, his eyes scanning for hazards, his mind focused on one goal: survival. Alara, following his lead, felt a flicker of hope. She realized that humans were capable of incredible resilience, ingenuity, and courage when faced with impossible odds. As they trudged forward, Alara stole a glance at Kyle. His face was set with determination, his eyes reflecting both focus and care. She realized that she was witnessing something rare, a human at his best, someone who combined strength, skill, and empathy in a way that transcended ordinary limits. The storm raged on, but the two humans moved through it as a team. Small successes, the temporary shelter, navigating hidden crevasses, staying warm enough to survive, built their confidence. The planet was harsh, but their will to live, their human ingenuity, and their courage made them formidable. The night seemed endless, but with every careful step, they moved closer to safety. And in the heart of that frozen storm, something powerful began to take shape. A bond forged in adversity. A story of survival that would be remembered as a testament to the extraordinary capabilities of humans. The final moment of part one came when the wind roared around them, and the snow fell like needles against their faces. Cale shielded Alara with his body as they crossed a particularly treacherous ridge. For a moment, the world seemed suspended between life and death, yet neither faltered. Humans had survived the impossible before, and they would survive this too. And then, against all odds, a faint glow appeared in the distance. The first sign of civilization, the promise of safety, and the hope that tomorrow might bring warmth, shelter, and the continuation of their extraordinary journey. The faint glow in the distance was the first sign of hope Alara had seen since the storm began. She blinked against the swirling snow, struggling to focus, but the outline of the colony's outpost became clearer as they approached. Cale held her close, his body shielding her from the icy wind that cut like blades. Every step was dangerous. Beneath the thin layer of snow, deep crevasses threatened to swallow them both. "Alara, keep close to me," Cale said, his voice steady but urgent. "One misstep and we could fall." "Follow my path exactly," she nodded weakly. Her body ached, her hands were numb, and each breath burned her lungs, but she trusted Cale completely. She had no other choice. Humans could endure extreme conditions if they worked together, she reminded herself, and this warrior had proven that instinct, courage, and intelligence could overcome almost anything. Hours passed as they navigated the treacherous ice. Cale moved carefully, testing the snow for hidden cracks using a long metal probe to check the ground ahead. Alara helped by holding the light beacon, reflecting it against the ice to create a makeshift path marker. The cold was relentless, but each step brought them closer to safety, and that small hope strengthened their resolve. At one point, a massive ice formation blocked their path. It rose like a frozen wall, jagged and slick. Cale studied it for a moment, then carefully guided Alara to a narrow passage he had spotted at the base. It was barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. The snow shifted under their weight, but Cale's experience kept them steady. Alara marveled at his skill. Humans, she realized, were capable of incredible resourcefulness when survival demanded it. Once through the passage, they reached a small plateau. Cale motioned for her to rest while he assessed the surroundings. From this vantage point, they could see the faint lights of the colony's main building, but between them lay a series of unstable ice fields. The storm had weakened the terrain, and one wrong step could be fatal. "Ilara, we'll have to move fast," Cale said. "The snow could give way under us. Are you ready?" She swallowed hard and nodded. "I am," she said. Though weak, her spirit was renewed. Cale's presence, his calm determination, and the knowledge that humans could survive anything gave her strength. They crossed the ice fields carefully, inch by inch, using makeshift poles to stabilize their footing. Occasionally, the ice cracked under the weight of the wind, sending tremors through the frozen ground. Kyle reacted immediately each time, pulling Ilara to safety. She felt a strange mix of fear and awe. In every movement, Cale showed her what it meant to survive, to fight against impossible odds, and to rely on both skill and instinct. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the plateau. The ground shifted violently, sending snow and ice tumbling down the slope. Cale's instincts kicked in instantly. He grabbed Ilara, pressing her close to his chest, and dove to the side. Snow and ice crashed around them, and for a moment it seemed as if the world itself wanted to end their journey. But Cale's experience and quick thinking saved them. When the dusting of snow settled, both were shaken but unharmed. "Are you okay?" Kyle asked, scanning her face. Ilara nodded, her lips trembling. "Thanks to you. You saved my life." Cale gave a small, grim smile. "We save each other out here. That's how humans survive." With renewed determination, they continued toward the colony. The storm began to ease, giving them their first real view of the outpost. Tall structures of metal and glass rose from the icy plains, surrounded by domes of warmth and light. Drones patrolled the area, scanning for hazards. It was a safe haven compared to the frozen nightmare outside. As they approached, Ilara noticed something unusual. A faint shimmer in the snow near one of the smaller domes caught her eye. Cale followed her gaze and frowned. "That isn't just ice," he said. He stepped closer, probing the area with his device. It revealed a hidden tunnel beneath the ice, a remnant of an abandoned alien outpost. Curiosity sparked in Ilara's tired mind. "Do you think it's safe to explore?" she asked. Cale considered it carefully. "We have to. There might be supplies or information that can help the colony, and it's a good place to rest if the storm picks up again." Together they entered the tunnel, their lights cutting through the darkness. The walls were smooth and cold, etched with alien symbols. Strange machines lay dormant, covered in frost. Ilara's scientific mind was alive with questions and possibilities. She ran her fingers over the symbols, noting patterns, while Cale remained alert, watching for any dangers. "Look at this," Ilara whispered, pointing to a large panel with glowing buttons. "Some kind of control system. It's still partially functional." Cale examined it. "We can use this to generate heat and light for a few hours. It might even help repair your beacon signal." Working together, they managed to activate the panel. Warm air filled the tunnel, melting some of the frost and giving them a chance to rest. Ilara felt a wave of relief. For the first time in days, she could breathe without fear of freezing. She looked at Cale with gratitude and newfound respect. Humans, she realized, were capable of not only survival but adaptation, turning challenges into opportunities. After resting, they continued their journey to the main colony building. The storm outside had completely died down, leaving a quiet, almost serene landscape. The ice glittered under the dim starlight, and the distant lights of the colony shone like beacons of hope. Each step felt lighter, each breath easier as they drew closer to safety. When they finally reached the colony, alarms rang out, and colony members rushed to meet them. Medics immediately attended to Ilara, checking her for frostbite and exhaustion, while engineers assisted Kyle in repairing their damaged equipment. The two were hailed as heroes, Ilara for surviving the storm using her intellect and courage, Cale for risking everything to save a life alone. Later, as they sat in the warmth of the main building, Ilara reflected on the journey. She realized that humans were extraordinary in ways that machines could never match. The ability to think, adapt, and act with courage in the face of danger. Cale, sitting across from her, looked tired but satisfied. He had faced countless challenges before, but this mission reminded him why he fought. Not for recognition, but for the survival of humanity itself. In the following days, Ilara resumed her research with renewed vigor. She explored the alien tunnel further, documenting ancient technology and patterns that hinted at a civilization long gone. Kale, meanwhile, returned to training new explorers, sharing his experiences and teaching them the importance of skill, judgment, and courage. The story of their survival spread across the colony, inspiring others to believe in human potential, creativity, and bravery. As the sun rose over the frozen plains, painting the ice in shades of gold and pink, Ilara and Kale stood together at the edge of the colony. The world outside was still harsh and unforgiving, but within them burned the light of resilience, hope, and the unyielding spirit of humans. Humans could survive anywhere, adapt to any challenge, and face the impossible with courage. And somewhere in the cold, distant reaches of Arendor, that spirit shone brighter than any storm, proving that even in the harshest conditions, life and human ingenuity would always prevail.